This is the B-2 Spirit, a $2 billion shadow shaped like a boomerang that shouldn't, by any law of physics, be able to fly. It has no tail, no rudders, and a silhouette that looks more like a glitch in the atmosphere than a heavy bomber. But on February 28, 2026, this aircraft did the one thing it was built for, something that required 30 hours of flight, 4 mid-air refuelings, and the most precise bunker-busting strike in the history of aerial warfare. It took down the Iranian supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, inside a facility that was supposed to be unreachable. To understand how that happened, you have to look past the charcoal black skin and the secret radar-absorbent coatings and look at what it's like inside the machine during a mission that changes the world. Most people think of a bomber as a massive, cavernous space filled with crew members, but the B-2 is the opposite. It's a masterclass in high-tech claustrophobia. There are only 2 people on board, the pilot in the left seat and the mission commander in the right. They sit in a cockpit that feels less like a plane and more like a windowless office in a submarine. The windows are narrow, coated in a gold film to keep radar waves from bouncing off the pilot's helmets, which means the view of the world is limited. For 30 hours, these 2 people are the only human presence in a machine that is constantly fighting to stay invisible. Behind the seats is a space no bigger than a walk-in closet. This is the crew rest area, and calling it a rest area is a stretch. There's no bed, just a flat section of the floor where one pilot can roll out a sleeping bag while the other flies. There's a tiny microwave for heating up food and a basic chemical toilet sitting right behind the right-hand seat with no curtain and no privacy. In 2026, during the flight toward Tehran, this tiny space was the entire world for the crew. They were flying from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri, crossing the Atlantic in total radio silence. To stay in the air that long, they have to dance with tankers like the KC-135, connecting a metal straw at 350 miles per hour in the dead of night, all while the B-2's flight computers make thousands of tiny adjustments per second to keep the flying wing from wobbling. The B-2 is a relaxed stability aircraft, which is a polite way of saying that without the computers, it would fall out of the sky instantly. As they approached Iranian airspace, the mission shifted from endurance to survival. Iran's air defense network, anchored by S-400 batteries, is designed to find and kill anything that flies. But the B-2 doesn't fly over radar, it flies through it. The aircraft's shape is designed to reflect radar energy away from the source, scattering it like light hitting a matte black wall. Inside the cockpit, the mission commander was watching the threat rings on his displays. These rings show the reach of enemy radar. The goal is to thread the needle, staying in the gaps where the radar signal is too weak to create a lock. On this night, the target was the Beit Raharibi compound in Tehran. Intelligence had confirmed that the supreme leader had moved deep underground into a level 4 bunker protected by layers of reinforced concrete and earth. To reach him, the B-2 wasn't carrying a standard payload. Inside the 2 massive internal weapons bays were 2 GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrators. Each one is a 30,000-pound spike of hardened steel, 20 feet long and filled with high explosives. It is the only weapon in the world capable of drilling through 60 feet of concrete before detonating. The crew reached the release point over Tehran at 03 a.m. The city below was a grid of lights, unaware that a ghost was hovering above. To drop the bombs, the B-2 has to do the one thing that makes it vulnerable. It has to open its doors. For those few seconds, the stealth profile is broken. The bay doors snapped open and the aircraft jumped upward as 30,000 pounds of steel fell away. The GBU-57 doesn't tumble, it uses its weight and GPS-guided fins to stabilize itself into a vertical lawn dart. It hit the courtyard of the compound with a dull thud, disappearing into the soil. It punched through the security levels, through the ruby concrete slabs, and into the heart of the bunker. The explosion wasn't a fireball on the surface, it was a localized earthquake that collapsed the lungs of everyone inside the room. Khamenei and his inner circle were gone before the sound of the impact even reached the street. In the cockpit, the doors slammed shut and the B-2 vanished again. The pilots turned back toward the west, beginning the long 15-hour journey home. They still had to cross the ocean, they still had to refuel, and they still had to stay awake. By the time they landed back in the quiet fields of Missouri, the regime in Iran was already crumbling, and the world was trying to figure out how a target that deep could be hit with such surgical precision. The answer was sitting in a hangar in Missouri, being wiped down by a ground crew, looking like it had never even left the ground. As the B-2 pulled away from the Iranian coast, the mission commander finally let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding since they crossed the border. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by the heavy, bone-deep exhaustion that comes from 30 hours of high-stakes flying. They were back over the water, but they weren't safe yet. The 12-day war was raging behind them, and the Iranian Air Force was scrambled, looking for anything that might have caused the massive underground collapse in the capital. But looking for a B-2 was like trying to find a specific puff of smoke in a thunderstorm. The aircraft's engines are buried deep within the wing, with S-shaped intakes that hide the spinning fan blades from radar and cooling systems that mix the hot exhaust with cold air to kill the heat signature. Even the heat-seeking missiles on an interceptor wouldn't be able to find a lock. Inside the cockpit, the glow of the multi-function displays was the only light. The pilot checked the fuel levels. They were low. The math of a global strike is unforgiving. You can get to the target on your own, but you can't get home without help. Somewhere over the dark Atlantic, a tanker was waiting for them. This is where the mission gets dangerous for a different reason. To refuel, the B-2 has to come out of the shadows. It has to turn on its transponder for a few brief minutes so the tanker can find it, and it has to open the refueling receptacle on its spine. This is a rotating door that, when flipped, exposes a metal hole that is a massive radar reflector. For the 20 minutes it takes to take on 100,000 pounds of fuel, the B-2 is just a big, slow target. The crew watched the radar, looking for any signs of pursuit, but the sky was empty. They connected with the tanker, the boom operator from the KC-135 guiding the nozzle into the B-2's back with the precision of a surgeon. Fuel surged into the internal tanks at 600 gallons per minute. The weight of the aircraft increased, changing its handling characteristics, making it feel heavy and sluggish in the thin air. Once the tanks were full, the doors flipped back over, the stealth skin was restored, and the B-2 slipped back into the dark. The journey home is the hardest part for the human element. The crew rest area behind the seats felt smaller than ever. The mission commander took his turn on the floor, trying to sleep while the aircraft's 4 General Electric engines hummed a constant vibrating tune. Every time the plane hit a pocket of turbulence, the floor bucked, a reminder that they were suspended 7 miles above the ocean in a carbon fiber shell. They weren't just flying a plane, they were managing a flying computer network. The B-2's Z-Bay, the section filled with the processors that handled the stealth and sensor fusion, was working overtime to monitor the satellite links for any word on the aftermath of the strike. The news was already breaking. Intelligence confirmed the target was neutralized. The decapitation strike had worked. By the time the Missouri coastline appeared on the nose camera, the pilots were operating on pure grit and caffeine. Landing a B-2 is a delicate process. Because of its wing shape, it wants to stay in the air. You have to fly it onto the runway, fighting the ground effect that tries to keep the wing floating. The wheels touched down at Whiteman Air Force Base with a puff of blue smoke. The mission was over. The pilots climbed out, their flight suits smelling of sweat and recycled air, stepping onto a tarmac that felt strangely still compared to the chaos they had left behind in Tehran. They walked into the debriefing room, leaving the billion-dollar ghost in the hands of the technicians. The B-2 would be checked for any scratches in its radar-absorbent paint, its engines would be inspected,